and I heard something going. The problem with us when we get to starting about something, we never actually finish it because we branch off into so many damn different directions that every one of them has very important meaning towards what we're discussing in the first place. What we call a Bigfoot and a Sasquatch, we call them boogers in the South. I said, what in the hell is that?
Welcome to another episode of Bigfoot Outlaw Radio. I'm Matt. Bear's being bashful, but he's here. Joined with us, as always, is our brother Kumbo. And we
Howdy.
got one heck of a guest with us. Her name is Suzy. She's involved in natural resources in North America. And she knows her stuff whenever it comes to animals and behavior. Suzy, how you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you guys?
Well, I'm
doing
all
great,
right.
man.
I hope everybody else is doing okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit, whatever you're comfortable with telling us about what you do and your background and everything.
Well, I work in natural resources in North America. I've worked on both sides of the border as far as Canada and the United States. Have never worked in Mexico, but I understand that the tequila is cheap, and I'd like to go there someday. I'm a wildlife behaviorist. I specialize in predatory animals, so your bears, your wolves, cougars, everything in at the top of the food chain. I've worked with biologists, and I've taught students. Basically, if I'm not in the woods, I'm at home having a nap, and then I'm back in the woods again.
That sounds like a job a lot of us would like to have.
Yes.
So, how did you get an interest in the Bigfoot world?
You know, initially I had very little, way back when they had the Bionic Man and Bigfoot, and I just thought this all a joke. And then one day I saw the Patty film, and, well, that's curious, you know. But everybody was back then saying that it was a hoax, so I didn't put much thought into it. But in 1986, a friend and I were fishing, and we're fishing salmon, and we got tired, it got foggy, and we decided to go sleep in the van. We went to sleep in the van, and the policeman rolled up, and like two young people out in the van in the park. So he pretty much run us out of the park. So we went parked up the roadways, and this little pull out, real rustic, somewhere we'd park construction vehicles in the bush. And I saw a dog man, or what they call a dog man. So it's a bipedal, canine-headed booger, more or less. And it was quite an experience. So that's when I started questioning things and saying, you know, that maybe there might be something else out there. Also, what brought me into my career is I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about wildlife and predator animals. And it's got me where I am today, about 27 years in the field.
Uh-huh.
Now,
Would you, go ahead, Matt.
I was just wanting to hear more about the dog man that you saw, what it looked like and
Yeah.
everything.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, if you would mind giving us sort of a blow-by-blow account of that.
Well, my good friend Vic kind of talks about your type 1 dog man, which is canine, back legs, and, you know, larger head, narrow body, and whatnot. And then we've got the Ryan Sullivan, who talks about Gugway, which the Ojibwe people call Tugway. It's ironic that they're from the Midwest to the East Coast, but there's such a similar line. But so that would be your bipedal, hominid-legged Dogman version. So that's a type 1 and 2. Right? The one that I saw was a type 1. And if you didn't know any better, your mind will scream out, it's a werewolf, right? My mind said it was a bear at first, and then it was standing up and running, and it all looked wrong. And I was like, oh, that's a werewolf. Right? And my friend was outside the truck, and he was urinating. And it seemed to be focused pretty much on him. So he took a run at him, and I screamed, and he got in the van, and he'd actually struck the door and slammed the van door shut.
Wow.
And I put the hammer down. It was a big old Ford 250, one of the construction vans.
Yeah.
And we peeled out of there, so the thing, I thought she was, if she wasn't on one wheel, she was on two, going around the corner getting out of there. But after that, it got me curious, and I started working first as a junior ranger for summer job, and then moved my way on up the whole ladder, and went to school at McMaster. So it was pretty good. That's how I got where I am.
Huh. So have you ever, out in your, in the field and all the work that you do, have you had another personal encounter with one?
Well, I've had some what I believe are close, but not. I didn't see them. I had a hunter once report to me that he was chased by a werewolf, and that was not too far away from where we had our sighting. And he was hunting out of season. It was not shotgun season. It was bow season with a shotgun. He didn't have a possession license for his an acquisition license for his shotgun, and he did not have a hunting license at all. So by the time I started leveling up charges, his story turned to he thinks he was chased by a wolf. But after I got the paperwork done and sent him on his way with a summons, I went and had a look, and I found some big bipedal tracks. So that's so there was one there, and I was there, but we may have missed each other.
Huh.
Okay. You mentioned that you've been doing this a while, and when we talked to you before, we come on the air, you said that over the years, how do you juggle your job description with what you had seen and then things that you know of since and learned since from being out in the woods, to the extent that it's not a bear, it's not a wolf, so forth and so on? I mean, me and Kumbo, we've done this enough that we can tell the differences, and I think you can explain what I'm talking about saying that a lot better than I can. How do you juggle your job with what you actually believe, knowing that you've got to protect the agency you work for, if that makes any sense?
Well, I pretty much, like everybody else who works for one of the natural resources agencies in North America, lots of us have seen things, and lots of us know things. But we're not stupid, and we're not ignorant to people, because they'll come up and they'll say, I think I saw this, or they'll be up in Wisconsin, and they'll say, well, I know I saw cougar tracks, right? Well, Wisconsin's official status is there are no cougars in Wisconsin.
Right.
Now, if you spend a few $100,000 getting an education and putting in all your intern time and all your volunteer time, and then you finally get that civil servant job for $40,000 a year, you're going to smile knowingly at the person, nod your head yes, and say, no, ma'am, I didn't hear anything about that.
Right.
And
yeah, and we respect that. We know that's, and I hate calling it a pat answer, but for protection of your job and as you mentioned, the pay and everything, I respect that. And I've mentioned on past shows where I've worked with Game and Fish Commission personnel who, you can always talk to these people, and if you're respectful about it, they'll give you little signs without saying things outright, that way they, under a oath or a court of law, they never done nothing wrong in that aspect. You get where I'm coming from with this, and I hate saying this because, I don't want to sit there and say, what a lot of people who are listening are probably thinking that maybe, well, they're covering this up for a reason. It's not the person that's covering it up. It's at the expense of the risk of losing their job. Am I correct?
That would be 100% correct.
Right.
One doesn't go running around saying, that's a spot Sasquatch when your boss wants to hear it was a bear.
Yeah,
right.
You don't buck departmental policy.
No.
And,
Now, have you ever encountered a situation where they've specifically expressed a policy in regards to this subject?
No, not verbally, but I have spoken of it to people who are higher up than me, maybe a few pay grades, and had an evaluation done on my psychiatric condition, and I was found perfectly healthy and perfectly mentally fine. But it was, if I had come up with any kind of a glitch, they would have released me right there and then.
Right.
And that's understood, though. I mean, you recognized it for what that possibility of it coming out too, and what's really aggravating about this is the ones who are questioning you too probably know as much as you do because of their experiences in climbing the ladder within the department. I mean, we already know that something like Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or a booger is out there. I mean, it's not a matter of believing it. We already know it's there. You're smart enough, being with your experience in the woods, and you freely admit that you've never seen a booger or a Sasquatch, but you with things you have heard and learned, say through the internet and read material and TV and all this, that you're not ignorant in the fact that this thing is real out there. You just have never actually laid eyes on it. But you have heard and seen things that you've been told or learned about that is associated with this, correct?
Well, I'll put it another way. You spend enough time out in the bush studying bears, for instance, you're going to get to know bears really well, and I do know bears really well. I've not been surprised in a very long time when it comes to bears. But you'll be hiking along someplace remote, and you're setting up your cams and doing your research, and you're looking for things, and all of a sudden you see something move in the corner of your eye, and you look over there and you think, oh, first thing is, oh, there's a bear. And about 2 minutes later you'll go, well, that was wrong. That wasn't right? That's not what a bear does. That's not what they do. And you look back, and of course, booger's gone. Mm-hmm. So no, I've never laid eyes facing eyes to a Sasquatch, right? But I've gotten that feeling, and just shortly after your brain gets that, oh, that wasn't right, little hairs on the back of your neck stand up, right? And
right.
And all of a sudden you know, right? And then you start sitting real quiet and listening. And sometimes you will hear something moving away from you that doesn't sound like it's on four legs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know?
And you recognize, I'm not saying that you don't know the difference between it, but due to your case studies throughout the years and your experience, you can determine from just hearing whether something is quadrupedal compared to bipedal, correct?
Oh, that's very simple. That's one of the very first things you start picking up on, because when you're someplace in a state or a provincial park, and you're in a backcountry canoe area, and you're about to use that little wooden box they put behind all of the campsites, and you hear clomp, 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 clomp coming down the trail, you sure as heck better know whether it's a moose or something on two legs, especially when you're a girl.
Yeah. So, have you, while you've been out there, and I'm sure you've been, well, first of all, have you ever been involved in the investigations of, deaths of any humans out in the wilderness areas, or have been, in an area where that's happened?
I was involved with an investigation of a young boy who was trout fishing a few hundred yards from his house in a local creek. He was mauled by something for sure. And it was written off as being a black bear, but I don't believe so, because he did get to his mother before passing on, and she didn't think it was a bear. And if a black bear's going to maul a kid for a dozen trout on a stringer that's tied to his belt loop, the bear's going to take the trout. He's not just going to, knock the kid over, roll him around, bite him, beat him up a bit, and then let him get away.
Yeah, I know of a person who was who had a stringer of fish, tied to his belt, and he was attacked. And what happened was the bear grabbed a hold of the stringer and took off across this sort of a slough that he was in, or I guess it was a curve in the river, and he took off across the sandbar and everything, dragging the guy by the stringer, and he drug him for he says almost 200 yards before finally the stringer broke, and the bear just kept on going. The bear wanted the fish. He didn't care about the guy.
And that was my point, because this unfortunate child was the stringer with 6 speckled trout was still on his belt loop, and it didn't look chewed or nothing. So, to my mind, that's not their behavior at all.
Made you scratch your head quite a bit. What if you don't mind, without probably revealing too much, because we want our listeners to understand that Suzy's on here at the risk of her job. Nothing, what she's doing is a very brave thing, and we're trying to be as discreet as we can because of her willing to come on the show and share a lot of things with us tonight. And so we're talking in a way that tries not to give too much away. But your other investigating officers towards that particular mauling, what was their take on all of this, and ended up what was the cause of death and so forth and so on? If you don't mind saying that. If you can't, I understand.
Well, I can't speak for them other fellas, but there were a lot of confused looks on people's faces. Right? Once we did an investigation and determined it was an animal attack, and then it was turned over to the police, who conducted theirs and gave their ruling based on our input and their own findings on their own, which is mostly how it works in our field. Either the police, the local police, or the state or provincial police, or the federal government will take over on things like that.
How often do you or...
Hey, yeah, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just curious. You discussed earlier how every once in a while someone, will come up to you and ask you about, hey, are there Bigfoot in the area or whatever, and the reaction that you give. But how often do people report things like that they saw something? Does it happen quite often, or is it something, that you hardly ever run across?
Well, let me give you a long answer to that. In 2006, a woman and her husband opening their cottage on a lake I won't name. He was down at the boat launch. He was getting the boat in, and she was walking around that cottage, opening up the storm shutters so that they could open the cottage up. And she caught a view of a Sasquatch. There's no doubt, because she actually snapped several photographs on her cell phone. And she reported to the police, and the police said that, are you crazy? So they called in natural resources. Natural resources turned around and brought in some professionals, and well, we were there for about 12 days, looking for evidence and whatnot. It was a real unknown creature sighting, meaning it was probably a bear, but nobody wanted to comment on it. Within 2 days of us leaving, the woman had called back and said, "Are you guys checking the place out still with a helicopter?" And there was a big black helicopter flying around for about 2 weeks. That's one. We get about between 18 and 22 reports a year in my area that are investigated.
So you do actually investigate them. You're told to investigate them, but you're not allowed to really talk about what you're investigating.
Well, that's the irony. The irony is every agency wants to know as much as they can, and they're going to do their best. And if the, I hate to be cliche, but if the body of evidence ever becomes so overwhelming that it's undeniable, at that point in time, tune will change. Such like in Michigan, when they said there was no cougars in Michigan, there were so many sightings, so many photographs taken that people finally said, well, there's cougars in Michigan. It's the same line.
Well, that's like, they said there were no cougars here in Missouri, and then one got run over in one area, and then within a year, another one got run over, 150 miles away, and then there were a bunch of sightings. I personally saw one, and then lo and behold, the place where I saw one, it was in an Amish guy's front yard, and some months later, he and his buddies killed a cougar right there behind his house, and that cougar is now mounted, and you can see it. You can come up here to the Department of Conservation, office there, just south of Kirksville, Missouri, and they got a full amount of that cougar there in the office. It was killed there in, I guess that was in Macon County. There's where it was killed, and now they're admitting that there are cougars here, here in Missouri. But but it was because there was just too much overwhelming, undeniable evidence.
Which brings me to the next point, which is that our community, the Sasquatch community, the cryptid community, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage because of infighting between all the factions about what's right, what's wrong, whether it's woo and whether there's dimensional portals, whether they're spirit creatures, whether they're flesh and blood. Are they Gigantopithecus, or are they a human hybrid? And we're simply arguing amongst each other to produce enough real evidence to convince the general public. Is when the general public is convinced, then the government will turn around and say, well, yes, we were mistaken, and these have now been discovered, and we're endeavoring to learn as much as we can about them so that we can provide for your safety. But until that happens, it ain't going to happen.
Right.
Well, not
what is your opinion if the government did acknowledge that they exist? In your opinion, as a professional in the field, what do you think that it will do? Will will we suddenly lose access to vast areas of public land and wilderness areas now that we enjoy for hunting and other outdoor activities, or will it be pretty much business as usual? What's your take on it? What's your feeling?
My personal feeling is that for a few years, some people will be very frightened to go into the woods. But once public awareness and knowledge about how to deal with it is made available, that people will return to enjoying the normal, everyday, going camping and fishing and doing everything else. And they may make a few preserves where these things are completely protected. And they'll probably make a law saying that you can't hunt or kill one because, well, they're rare. They're an endangered species. Human encroachment is making them more and more endangered all the time. So they're going to be protected, and eventually the public awareness will come back, and people will be doing it. There's some things you need to know, like if you're going to go hiking in bear country, you don't wear a bright blue blazer. Right? Deer, bear, anything with that conical eye structure, where there's no more cones than there are tubes, see blue vividly, right? And it's not a natural color that they have in their environment unless it's a little tiny thing on the ground where it's a little flower. So in this big and those little flowers are sweet, by the way, so when bears go to eat it. This is to them, they're looking at this big bright blue thing and they're wondering, should I bite it? Is it good to eat?
I think in a way, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, that, the governments, whether it's state or federal or Providence or whatever, already have these type locations already in place. They just not acknowledging that it's for the protection or the safety of the public in relation to a Bigfoot. I'm thinking most of these national parks and state parks that declare off limits to people taking firearms in there for whatever reason, is probably a quote-unquote preserve-like environment already established by various governments in their own way to protect them without actually coming flat out and saying this is why it's there. They use other reasoning behind that. What do you think about that?
Well, let me just do some reasoning from the other side. When you're a hunter, and the very first thing you learn when you take your hunter safety course, if you've had one, or that your dad teaches you, is if you don't know what it is, don't shoot it.
Right.
Right. That translates to more, not only ethical situation, that translates to law. See, every animal in North America is owned by our government. So your deer that you shoot, that's government property, which is why you can only shoot it during a certain time if you have a certain license and with a certain equipment that it's required during that season.
Right. States, yeah, state regulations.
Now you turn around and you're a hunter and you go out and you see a Sasquatch. She ain't doing nothing to you. It's not attacking you. There's no evidence that it tried to attack you. And you shoot that thing. And so the local sheriff's going to come and say, I don't know what to do with that. So he's going to call natural resources or fisheries or whoever he's going to call, and they're going to come out there and they're going to look at it and go, all right, we're confiscating this. And if the person turns around who thinks he's going to make $1 million on it and says, no, I shot it, it's mine, they're going to say, right? Not only are we taking it, we're charging you, and they're going to compile a lengthy list of charges against you because first you shot something that wasn't identifiable. So you didn't have a license, and it wasn't in season because it's not identifiable. And if you turn around and say, well, I shot it because I want proof that these things exist, and you didn't have a right to shoot at it. Now, if it's attacking your house or it's raping something or it's doing something wrong, then yeah. Okay, now it's defense of your property, yourself, or your things that are in your care. But going out with a rifle, say I'm going to hunt Sasquatch, is the stupidest thing you're ever going to do, because you're either going to end up silent because you're in jail, or you're going to end up silent because you're afraid of going to jail.
Right. You know, when you was talking about, you and Kumbo was discussing cougars, you know, they deny that they are cougars in the state of Mississippi or Alabama. Tim knows this very well. Talked to a Game and Fish Commission officer in Mississippi about this. I said, look, I've seen them. I know they're there. You can't deny that they're there, but you will. And, all right, if it don't exist in the state of Mississippi or Alabama, what's to prevent me from going out there during the course of hunting or, as you say, predation upon, say, your cattle or your horses or whatever you're raising on your local farms or ranches, and you shoot one? What happens then? The officer told me, he said, we will probably arrest you and take the body, like what you just said. And this is in relation to supposedly another unnamed or animal that has been declared not to belong in the state of Alabama or Mississippi. And I said, well, you're just telling me it don't exist here, but I'm showing you that it does, because there's the carcass right here at your feet. He said, I see this carcass, you see this carcass, but nobody else will, and will still deny that it's here. You didn't do the state government or anything any favors. You didn't do yourself any favors. It's against the law. I said, well, how can you sit there and deny it's not here when I know it's here, but there's no way I can prove it's here? He said, that's your problem. You know, and it was just a basic conversation.
Well, that's actually happened before. People have shot them in states or hit them with cars and stuff where they supposedly don't have a population, and they just say that they wandered in from a neighboring state that does have them. Or, you know, they traveled all the way across the United States. They've, well, I don't know if they documented it or not, but they say they
in the case of Alabama and Mississippi, they claim that it came from Florida. You know, Kumbo can explain this better than I can. You know, they do admit that they do have large cats in Florida. You know, we call them panthers up here in especially Alabama and Mississippi, but they're basically just like a cougar, mountain lion, or a big cat, but there's, you know, basically no mountains around here, and they call it one of those Florida species that migrated north into the state. He's lost, in other words.
Right.
Yeah.
Suzy, why do they deny cougars? I mean, everybody knows they exist. So there's other dangerous animals out there that people like. In Oklahoma, they'll deny cougars in certain areas for sure, but we have black bears. So a black bear is a predatory animal just like a cougar, so why would they deny if a state has them?
All right. Well, there's a fear. Human nature's. I'm not a behaviorist for humans, but I am for animals, and human nature is pretty. People think about a bear, and they think it's a big lumbering thing moving through the woods, and they're going to hear it coming, they're going to see it coming, and they associate bears with this big lumbering beast. Cougars are, because of people, everybody has seen a house cat. Everybody's seen a barn cat. They've probably seen one take out a bird or something, right? They're stealthy, they're quiet, they slip up on you, they sneak up on you, they scare the hell out of you, right? And everywhere where cougars are acknowledged as being there, there'll be signs in every place, every state park, every province, warning of the danger of cougars and the fact that they will come out of a tree and attack you, that they'll take the high ground, so you should look up, right? I've even seen a sign that talked about cougars stashing deer in trees, and people haven't been hit by the deer when it falls down because it's rotten.
Right.
You know, so fear is a big deal, right? And it's another big deal for burgers and dogmen and anything else. As long as people are afraid, they're going to have a good reason to conceal it, because panic is not something the government allows.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they wouldn't deny if all of a sudden, I don't know what states don't have them. You'll have to excuse me, but let's say North Dakota isn't supposed to have armadillos, but people see armadillos everywhere in North Dakota. They're not going to deny that armadillos exist in North Dakota, because armadillos are nothing to be afraid of because they're not predators, correct?
Well, they will certainly quickly acknowledge the fact that there's armadillos in Dakota, because some trucker's going to come along and that armadillo's going to roll up just like an iron ball and take out a universal joint. They're going to have a truck rack and a dead body, and they're going to go, oh, well, we have armadillos.
So is it, do you think, with that train of thought, whenever it comes to Bigfoot and what other creatures out there that might be like that, is it a combination of plausible deniability on their part and the fact that they're predators and not these big furry forest friends?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Plausible deniability is everything. We did not know about it until just now, but we'll get back to you real soon about what it's all about.
Right.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, an official report that took 10 years to compile is going to come out.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to know exactly how to deal with this in a safe manner.
Right.
And that's it, you know what I mean?
You know, there was a report released by the United States Army in the 70s, you know, and they...
Army Corps of Engineers, yes, sir.
Yeah, would you mind going into that? Because I know you studied it.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers acknowledged that there are Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the Sierra Nevada, all the way on up through Washington into Canada. And they acknowledged that because they'd had enough soldiers that come across them while they were out there working, that it got added to a safety manual. And as it got added to a safety manual, then their biologists decided that they're going to print up a what to look for kind of thing so that the soldiers would recognize it. And this is all in an official capacity, and it's still currently available on the internet today because it was leaked. And they'll never erase that. The original document's long gone, but they'll never erase it. You know, it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of, Fort Lewis, Washington is in that area. And, that place is just absolutely eat up with sighting reports. And I had heard from some soldiers that had been stationed up at Fort Lewis that they had been, told how to deal with them and, what to watch out for and, do's and don'ts and kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When did it start being a more acceptable fact that these hominid-type creatures was not only seen in the Pacific Northwest and more so all across the North American continent within the community where you work, natural resources and everything? Have you ever taken notice of that?
Well, can't answer that question in a right manner, so I'm going to answer it the best I can. Our weather patterns across North America have been changing for the last 25 years or so. Before that, there wasn't a whole lot in the line of reports on the East Coast or any farther than the Midwest about Sasquatch and whatnot. What has happened is, in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, many of the creatures, we'll call them creatures, have when it was colder, harsher weather, the ones that were cold weather adapted moved north. And let's just take Canada for an example. About 90% of the population of Canada is within 100 kilometers of the border, right? So 80-odd miles or whatever. After that, it's bush. It's boreal forest all the way to the end of the tree line. After that, it's Arctic conditions. And that goes from the east coast of that country all the way to the west coast of that country to Alaska. Nobody's going to see those animals while they're up there. Weather conditions have been changing. It's warming up. They're having to come to us, a little bit closer to us, and now you have a rash of sightings in the last 25 years. So climatic change, which is a natural occurring thing, is bringing them back. Because if you go back to the 1800s, when the voyageurs were doing their thing, in the early 1800s, they had constant reports of what they called bear man and ape man, or hairy people.
Right. Yeah, regional names for what they are interpreting them to be, correct.
Mm-hmm. So it's a cycle of life, and we're seeing them come up this way as our weather and our climate changes.
And you're also seeing that happen with other predators, like, for instance, polar bears, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Polar bears. Grizzly bears are going farther east than they've ever gone before. The brown bears have been seen well into the mid, the western part of the east coast. We're seeing a revival of animals and species. Some of it is aided by us, like the wolf population being brought back is largely because people are working toward that. But bears are getting bigger and they're coming closer. There's no doubt about it. Which brings us to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Which brings us to another thing. 99.9% of all animal attacks are not the animal's fault. He may have intentionally attacked you because he's a predator, but the animal is an opportunistic thing, and he's going to take you when you are being stupid. So, it's like saying don't go walking in Texas in a field and knowing the snakes are migrating, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you're going to get bit, right? So you don't want to go playing in the woods or letting your kids run around and play when the black bears are feeding up for wintertime, right?
Right.
It's just common sense.
Yep.
Now,
plus, urban development is encroaching every day deeper into the suburbs of these cities. And when you go farther out and you grow farther out, if for no other reason just to put yourself in another tax bracket so you won't have to pay all those city taxes, so forth and so on, a lot of people are building and moving out more into the country, not knowing what's in the country. Would you mind talking about that a little bit? Because it involves not only wolves and panthers, cougars, and bears, but in essence, Bigfoot too, because we're encroaching steadily upon their ground, established territories.
About 6 years ago, I took a vacation down in Texas in a place called, oh my God, think about it, South Padre Island, Texas. It's near, but not far from Brownsville, Texas.
I was down there last winter.
And after that, on the way there, I stopped off in Boggy Creek.
Right.
And I got some maps of Boggy Creek, of the whole area and all the settlement around there from the 1950s. And then you turn around and you get the topo maps from today, and you compare them. Well, that poor Boggy Creek booger, he's getting down to a postage stamp, in what he can actually go and hide in.
Right.
We are destroying their habitat quickly without thought for anything else. And the few protections we do have for our wildlife are, there are a lot of people out there who think nothing of, well, I got a deer, but I get another one, nobody's going to notice. And you can't do that. I hunt myself. My partner and I hunt. We meat hunt. We're not out for trophies. I will take the largest, oldest one I can find because the older ones are usually heavier and strong and bigger, and they're not at the end of their breeding period. So, but we got to be responsible. So if I get a deer and she has a tag, yeah, if I get a deer and my partner has a tag, we don't go for another deer.
Right. You go for your. I mean, you establish. I understand that. That's what I do now, and I may not have done it 20 years ago, but I was just out. That was when I was stupid. A lot of people may consider me still stupid, but I'd like to think I've gotten a little more patient, respectful, and lenient towards the given laws.
Let's just say, Bear, you have that country boy charm that everybody likes.
Not everybody. Now, Suzy, from what you were mentioning,
go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to go back to the bear thing. Obviously, you know a little something about bears and their behavior. Now, one of the most commonly things stated by skeptics is that Bigfoot sightings are misidentified bear sightings. In your opinion, how true is that?
Okay. Well, when you grew up, Matt, did you watch read the book or watch the Disney series, The Jungle Book?
I sure did. Bear
Can you tell the difference between? Can you tell the difference between Blue and one of the gorillas?
Yes, I can.
Immediately identify the difference between both of them?
Yeah. I believe
so
I could.
So you're a man of intelligence, right? I figure, and I figure most people are intelligent enough to tell the difference between a bear and a gorilla.
I believe so.
So I'm going to say this unofficially as far as it goes. I believe most people can tell you what a bear is. They've seen enough of them on TV. Right? First sight, they're going to know exactly what they're looking at. Yep. You ain't seen a booger, you don't know what a booger looks like. That's how it goes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But so when somebody says, I saw a monster, they saw a monster.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Logic, though, predicates at times something that you just witnessed, and it's something that does not equate to anything that has been accepted as being there. And a lot of people at times will question what they just saw, especially when a booger is on all fours, which we do know and realize that we really estimate that about 85% of an average booger's lifestyle, he's on all fours, especially in the eastern part of the United States. And the reason we come to that logic is we figured out that these things, these Bigfoot or boogers, they realize that most of the creatures in the eastern part of the United States are quadrupedal or travel upon all fours. And we also know that the intelligence level of a primitive type hominid, it understands that may be a form of camouflage to a large degree. I honestly believe that. What do you think of that?
I think it applies true to your average city slicker. I'm being frank and honest, and don't want to offend anybody out there, but if I see a booger and his ass is lower to the ground than his shoulders are, I know it ain't a bear.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? Now, if I'm on the West Coast and I see a grizzly bear, that little hump on his back will be the only thing that's taller, but his head is going to be pretty much level out with the hump, whereas when you see a booger, their head is couched down, kind of tucked down. And see, this is why I said originally to you guys before when we first talked about it, that I'll see something. I'll be out working far away. I'll get that tingly sensation in the back of the neck, and I'll see something out of the corner of my eye. 2 seconds later, it's gone. But there was something wrong with that. It couldn't have been a bear.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because of these things. And then it's like, darn, I didn't, if I'd have just focused for a second, I'd have saw it. Instead of, oh, darn, I got a bunch of crushed leaves, some snap branches, a couple of partial prints, and nothing to go on.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And along that same train of thought, you, especially with your profession being like it is, behavioral, you already realized that if you was to turn around immediately, swing your head in that direction, you're just giving yourself away, whether it's bear or whatever. Am I correct in that assessment too? Would you explain that? Yeah, would you explain what I'm talking about?
Every predator has a natural response. Now, if predator's taking notice of you, but he's not stalking you, and you focus your attention on him, you could trigger a charge. It's quite possible.
Right.
Right? You could trigger any number of different responses depending on the animal, the individual animal. Where a behaviorist comes in is we can read an animal's body language. So we're going to tell you, okay, that bear is not, we're going to tell the biologist or the veterinary pathologist, okay, that bear's not sedated enough yet. You're not going to go over there. Basically, body language is everything. And we can get all sorts of biological topic here, but when it comes right down to it, predatory animals display a predatory body language.
Right.
And if you challenge them, because it's a territorial thing, you're going to get aggression.
Yeah, I walked up on a cougar one time that had a deer down. That was had the deer down, had it by the throat, and was in the process of killing it. And I heard the scuffle going on. It was during muzzleloader season. I walked up on the thing, and I heard it saw me coming before I saw it, and it was growling and everything. But when I finally spotted it and made eye contact with it, the intensity of the situation went up exponentially. And, I didn't know if I was going to get out of there. I immediately, as soon as I realized what I was looking at, I averted my eyes, and didn't look at it, and then started slowly backing away. And, I still think my lucky stars I was able to get out of that one alive.
Well, you submitted it to it by averting your eyes, and you said, "Listen, I know this is your territory. I'm backing out." And it just said, "Well, my food's more important than you are," and it kept eating.
Right.
Right. But I'm certainly glad to find out that you're a black powder enthusiast. I got a Hawken that knocks me ass over tea kettle every single time.
Yeah. I have a modern muzzleloader. I have a Thompson Center Omega with a scope, 50 caliber with a scope on it, and I've hunted with it for several years. But I have a first year of production. My dad gave it to me for Christmas right after my 16th birthday, and like I said, his first year of production, Thompson Center Renegade, 54 caliber, percussion. And, it's other than some orange paint on the front side, it's just the way it was when it came out of the box. And I hadn't used it in years, and I broke it out this year, decided to use it, and I got a deer with it. Of course, I went out and practiced with it and everything, got good at shooting it again. And I got a deer with it at 135 yards. Made an excellent shot. And
well, you're a better shot on that than me, because the best I do is I take it off the wall once a year. I clean it, I prime it, and I go out, and I take one shot at the target. And if I hit that target anywhere on the 4x4 sheet of plywood, I'm happy, and then I nurse my bruised shoulder for about 3 weeks.
Well, that thing, when I was a kid, when I was 16 years old, my dad first gave it to me. I wanted to load it to the max every time, and of course, back then the only thing we had for it was round balls or those old. I think they were 540 grain or 500 and something grain. What's it called? Maxi balls, and Lord, those things. And of course, I was loading 120 grains of powder. And that damn thing would just about screw you in the ground. You know, when you'd shoot it, and I mean, it like I said, it just about knock you over or knock you down. But now, thank goodness, you know, they have sabot these sabos for them, and I can shoot a lighter weight bullet. I can shoot a 250 to 300 grain pistol bullet out of it, and I have reduced my charge. I'm down now. I use about 100 grains or whatever, and that gives me the a trajectory and everything that's good out to about 140 yards or so, and a whole lot less recoil.
I think for me that trying it once a year is more like this. As I'm getting older, my bottom's getting bigger, and I'm starting to resemble a weeble. Remember Weeble's Wobble?
Oh yeah.
I'm hoping one of these years I'll shoot it and I won't fall down. So.
Yeah.
Well, I ain't got that problem. I got more no acetal than I got anything else. But
yeah.
I got the Dunlap disease, but I got no acetal disease too. But getting back to the subject, would you? All right, in relation to threatening gestures towards predators, and I don't see any problem with calling a Bigfoot or a booger a predator to a large degree. What do you not recommend you do, say, if you was walking down a trail and one just stepped out of the bush or you saw one over there on the edge watching you? What do you recommend not to do?
I'll give you an example. I know a lady that I've talked to by writing, not personally, but she had an experience where she was squatting down near. She was out there doing some Bigfooting, trying to see what she can find, and if there's anything in her hair. She's squatting down by a creek and looking across the creek where she thought she'd seen something a few days before. Just scanning, and we all do that. We'll all go back to a spot where we think we saw something and try 2-3 times to see if we can see it again. And
repeat it. And that's what a lot of people do. Not changing the subject real quick, but people just, when they find out a location where somebody's seen one, everybody and their brother wants to go there. But go on ahead.
So she heard this hellacious growl behind her and heard thump, thump, thump. And so she stood up as a reaction to her situation, because when you're squatting down, you're vulnerable. Now you're prey, right? She stood up to her full height and turned to face it, and it stopped. She didn't see it. She saw bushes moving, but it stopped. And then it took off in the other direction, right? Her position of vulnerability triggered a response from whatever it was that was a predatory response.
Right.
Right. So getting back to your original question is, what can you do to stop not looking like prey? You don't want to look like prey. You want to look bigger, stronger than you are. You want to look. That's why when a black bear comes in your campsite looking for hot dog runs or a piece of cherry pie that some kid left on the thing, that they tell you what to do is to stand up to your fullest height, raise your arms in the air, and yell at him.
Right.
9 times out of 10, the bear will go, oh, well, that's big enough that if we get a scuffle, it might hurt me, and it's just not, I might be able to take it, but it ain't worth it. Take off, because no predator wants to put himself in immediate danger of injury while acquiring food, right? It's no good to eat a meal if you're going to die tomorrow because you bled out.
Right.
Or if you broke a bone and you're not going to be able to hunt for the rest of the season.
Right. And they're cognizant of this fact, correct, to a certain degree.
Yeah. The animals are, that's something their mama tunes when they're just cubs.
Okay. in regard to looking at one directly in the eyes, I've heard ever since I've been doing this, don't look one directly in the eyes. It will cause you much headache and trouble. What do you say about all this?
Are we talking about a bear, or are we talking about a booger?
Probably a booger in regard to that, but, a lot of predators base a lot of things on same attributes to a certain degree. Or am I wrong with even saying that?
Okay, now, if you have a bear, a black bear, let's talk about your normal-sized East Coast black bear. There's some signs you can look for. If he's chattering his teeth, you didn't look him in the eye, because he's thinking he's going to eat you, is what he is when he's chattering his teeth. Right now, you can get your docile bear who wanders into a campsite, and you can stand up, holler him, and you have to make eye contact, and he'll still take off. It depends on the mannerism of the animal. 9 times out of 10, you turn around, you make direct eye contact, you are issuing a challenge to that animal. So if you want to make the challenge, you do that. You try not to make the challenge because, face it, a booger's a big animal. He's just a wood booger, right? But let's talk about what Brian calls a gugway. Right? This is the one that has more of a canine head. I think more baboonish, in my opinion. But
didn't you say this may be sort of like a Wendigo?
Yeah, well, Wendigos are a little bit bigger, but they're.
Is it like the Beast of Seven Shoots?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Beast of Seven Shoots. Okay. So you look that thing in the eye. It's a dominant creature. They are more aggressive than the average booger.
Right.
What you're asking for is a confrontation. Right? No confrontation that you're not going to win unless you got a gun and a few people with guns, actually.
Right.
The adrenaline is amazing.
We've seen situations and run into situations which Matt and Kumbo can attest to this to a large degree. With a booger, it's popping of the teeth. I call it lip smacking. And once you get real close to one, I'm talking about probably within its arm reach or just a little further, maybe 5 or 6 yards up to 10 yards away, they'll also start a hissing type sound. We've recognized this through our years of investigation, and we realized that was the too close zone. Could that equate to, say, what a bear does in its regard to that popping of its teeth or whatever you just described it as?
The teeth chatter is just that. It is, you're challenging me, you're pissing me off, and you've got to rethink and get out of here, or, and by rethinking, I mean turn around and bolt, because then you're going to trigger a predatory response. You have to back out of there real slow, you have to maintain your posture that you are, you're going to defend yourself. And what I'll tell people who are going into a bear area with black bears is, and this used to be controversial, but it's not anymore. If you're attacked by a black bear, years ago they used to say roll up and play dead. Ain't gonna do no good. Black bear like to eat dead things. He eat lots of dead things. But what you're gonna do is take...
Especially the way Kumbo smells. He smells dead all the time anyway.
So what you got to do is you got to fight with everything you got. If you're attacked, you have to defend yourself. You got a stick, you got a rock, you got your knife on your belt. Whatever you have in hand, you got a can of hairspray. It'll do something to the eyes.
Right.
There's no longer that be submissive as advice to people in a bear encounter. If you're submissive, you're food.
Yeah.
And years ago, that was the advice. Well, through trial and error, they have discovered the error of their ways, and now the advice is fight with everything you got.
Especially in the facial areas of a predator, correct?
Yes.
One more thing, never turn your back to them when you're leaving either, correct? Because once you turn your back, am I wrong about that?
It'll depend on the situation. When you're leaving in the first 30, 40, 50, 100 yards, you might not want to turn your back, but if you don't hear them following you, after 150 yards, I'd make tracks. Old cartoons where the legs were spinning in the air.
Oh, yeah.
You ought to be doing that.
Yeah.
Do me a favor real quick and help a friend of mine out. Brian Sullivan is getting into a big deal with some hunters who claim black bear does not exceed 500-600 pounds of body weight. Would you expound upon that, please?
Well, I had the occasion to work in Newfoundland, Canada, a few years ago, and we tagged bears at 650 to 785 pounds. In Newfoundland, they are your common black bear with a white patch on their chest. They're probably the biggest bears brown bears or black bears in North America. But there have been 700 pounders caught out in Minnesota and out there as well. They're odd, but they're getting bigger because the climate's changing, the season's changing. There's more food to be get.
Mm-hmm.
It's the size of an animal is determined by the amount of food he can eat, unless it's a rabbit. Right, and even if it's a rabbit, well, it's a really good year for rabbit. You can get a pretty good size rabbit on the plate, So it's what's available, how much there is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to talk about averages, well, you won't see a black bear up over 800 pounds unless it's really well fed. Now, a grizzly bear can go tilt horizon 3 times there, Pat. Right. Grizzly bears, brown bears, they're all Ursus. They're all going to do. And there used to be, the old school thought that there were 6 different kinds of brown bear. But now we're all acknowledging they got the European brown bear and you've got the North American brown bear. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that the circumstances, once they get to a certain size, they get that hump on their back that's really pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you get one that's around 600 pounds, that hump isn't so badly pronounced. It's just a brown color with a bigger head on it.
Right.
It's all about availability of food.
Personal encounter with one?
Well, I've had some what I believe are close, but not. I didn't see them. I had a hunter once report to me that he was chased by a werewolf, and that was not too far away from where we had our sighting, and he was hunting out of season. It was not shotgun season. It was bow season with a shotgun. He didn't have a possession license for his an acquisition license for his shotgun, and he did not have a hunting license at all. So by the time I started leveling up charges, his story turned to he thinks he was chased by a wolf. But after I got the paperwork done and sent him on his way with the summons, I went and had a look, and I found some big bipedal tracks. So that's so there was one there, and I was there, but we may have missed each other.
Huh.
Okay. You mentioned that you've been doing this a while, and when we talked to you before, we come on the air, you said that over the years, how do you juggle your job description with what you had seen and then things that you know of since and learned since from being out in the woods to the extent that it's not a bear, it's not a wolf, so forth and so on. I mean, me and Kumbo, we've done this enough that we can tell the differences, and I think you can explain what I'm talking about saying that a lot better than I can. How do you juggle your job with what you actually believe, knowing that you've got to protect the agency you work for, if that makes any sense?
Well, I pretty much like everybody else who works for one of the natural resources agencies in North America. Lots of us have seen things, and lots of us know things. But we're not stupid, and we're not ignorant to people, because they'll come up and they'll say, I think I saw this, or they'll be up in Wisconsin, and they'll say, well, I know I saw cougar tracks, right? Well, Wisconsin's official status is there are no cougars in Wisconsin.
Right.
Now, if you spend a few $100,000 getting an education and putting in all your intern time and all your volunteer time, and then you finally get that civil servant job for $40,000 a year, you're going to smile knowingly at the person, nod your head yes, and say, no, ma'am, I didn't hear anything about that.
Right.
And
yeah, and we respect that. We know that's, and I hate calling it a pat answer, but for protection of your job and as you mentioned, the pay and everything, I respect that. And I've mentioned on past shows where I've worked with Game and Fish Commission personnel who, you can always talk to these people, and if you're respectful about it, they'll give you little signs without saying things outright. That way they, under a oath or a court of law, they never done nothing wrong in that aspect. You get where I'm coming from with this, and I hate saying this because, I don't want to sit there and say, what a lot of people who are listening are probably thinking, that maybe, well, they're covering this up for a reason. It's not the person that's covering it up. It's at the expense of the risk of...
basically, if I'm not in the woods, I'm at home having a nap, and then I'm back in the woods again.
That sounds like a job a lot of us would like to have.
Yes.
So how did you get an interest in the Bigfoot world?
Initially I had very little, way back when they had the Bionic Man and Bigfoot, and I just thought this all joke. And then one day I saw the Patty film, and, well, that's curious, But everybody was back then saying that it was a hoax, so I didn't put much thought into it. But in 1986, a friend and I were fishing, and we're fishing salmon, and we got tired, it got foggy, and we decided to go sleep in the van. We went to sleep in the van, and the policeman rolled up and didn't like two young people out in the van in the park. So he pretty much run us out of the park. So we went and parked up the roadways, and this little pull-out, real rustic, somewhere we'd park construction vehicles in the bush. And I saw a dog man, or what they call a dog man. So it's a bipedal, canine-headed booger, more or less. And it was quite an experience. So that's when I started questioning things and saying, that maybe there might be something else out there. Also, what brought me into my career is I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about wildlife and predator animals. And it's got me where I am today, about 27 years in the field.
Uh-huh.
Now,
would you... Go ahead, Matt.
I was just wanting to hear more about the dog man that you saw, what it looked like and
Yeah.
everything.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, if you would mind giving us sort of a blow-by-blow account of that.
Well, my good friend Vic kind of talks about your type 1 dog man, which is canine back legs and larger head, narrow body and whatnot. And then we've got the Ryan Sullivan, who talks about Gugly, which the Ojibwe people call tugway. It's ironic that they're from the Midwest to the East Coast, but there's such a similar line. But so that would be your bipedal, hominid-legged dogman version. So that's a type 1 and 2. Right? The one that I saw was a type 1. And if you didn't know any better, your mind will scream out, it's a werewolf, right? My mind said it was a bear at first, and then it was standing up and running, and it all looked wrong. And I was like, oh, that's a werewolf. Right? And my friend was outside the truck, and he was urinating. And it seemed to be focused pretty much on him. So he took a run at him, and I screamed, and he got in the van, and he'd actually struck the door and slammed the van door shut.
Wow.
And I put the hammer down. It was a big old Ford 250, one of the construction vans.
Yeah.
And we peeled out of there, so the thing, I thought she was, if she wasn't on one wheel, she was on two, going around the corner getting out of there. But after that, it got me curious, and I started working first as a junior ranger for summer job, and then moved my way on up the whole ladder, and went to school at McMaster. So it was pretty good. That's how I got where I am.
Huh. So have you ever, out in your, in the field and all the work that you do, have you had another...
And I heard something going. The problem with us when we get to starting about something, we never actually finish it because we branch off into so many damn different directions that every one of them has very important meaning towards what we're discussing in the first place. What we call a Bigfoot and a Sasquatch, we call them boogers in the South. I said, what in the hell is that?
Welcome to another episode of Bigfoot Outlaw Radio. I'm Matt. Bear's being bashful, but he's here. Joined with us, as always, is our brother Kumbo. And we
Howdy.
got one heck of a guest with us. Her name is Suzy. She's involved in natural resources in North America. And she knows her stuff whenever it comes to animals and behavior. Suzy, how you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you guys?
Well, I'm
Doing
all
great,
right.
man.
I hope everybody else is doing okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit, whatever you're comfortable with telling us about what you do and your background and everything.
Well, I work in natural resources in North America. I've worked on both sides of the border as far as Canada and the United States. Have never worked in Mexico, but I understand that the tequila is cheap, and I'd like to go there someday. I'm a wildlife behaviorist. I specialize in predatory animals, so your bears, your wolves, cougars, everything in at the top of the food chain. I've worked with biologists, and I've taught students